My guest isn't just a leader in the acromegaly space. She's someone that understands this disease inside out. I'm overwhelmed with joy to have my sister in acromegaly, Jill Sisco, on the podcast. Jill is the president of the Acromegaly Community, an organization that has become a lifeline for so many of us, navigating diagnosis, treatment, and everything that comes thereafter. But Jill's story isn't just about titles or advocacy. It's about living with acromegaly as well. It's about turning fear into purpose, isolation into connection, and diagnosis into determination. At a time when so many of us with acromegaly feel unheard, unseen, and misunderstood, Jill has helped build a community where our voices matter and where support doesn't end after surgery or a prescription. Jill, I am truly honored to have you here today. Welcome to Talking Acromegaly with Tony.
Tony, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. I can't thank you enough for what you're doing to help our community. Stepping forward and being a leader isn't easy. So I really have to commend you for what you are doing. You're making a difference.
Thank you so much, Jill. I appreciate that. Your words of encouragement keep me going. Okay, I'll start from early on. For people who may not know you yet, can you share your personal journey with acromegaly with us?
Well, I'd be happy to. I had a pretty normal teenage years. And when I turned about 21, I started noticing unexplained weight gain. In fact, I even went on a strict 600-calorie diet. And I was still gaining weight. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was exercising all the time. And, it was a real struggle. And from then, I joined Weight Watchers. I did everything that I thought that you were supposed to do. And it really wasn't helping much. And, years move along. And I have an ectopic pregnancy that burst. And I don't know that acromegaly played a role in that, but we thought that it would be difficult for me to become pregnant again. And luckily, I ended up having a successful pregnancy about a year and a half later. And I know for a fact that I had acromegaly while I was pregnant with my daughter. I believe my appearance had already, by that time, had changed. And, life, I was already experiencing so many of the symptoms. My shoe size had increased, which I attributed because of the weight gain. My hands had actually grown an entire digit in length. My best friend and I have been best friends since we were very young, and my hands were a full digit longer than hers from the time that I was 20. At 18, they were about the same size. And, by the time that I was in my early 30s, they were a full digit longer. And, I started experiencing unexplained gastrointestinal issues. That was one of my big symptoms. And someone came to me and said, well, it sounds like you're having gallbladder problems, which now looking back, there's a lot of us that have these issues. And that's why I'm mentioning this. They did one of the nuclear scans on my gallbladder, and they had found that it worked for the first 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden it had just stopped. And so they said, we're going to remove your gallbladder. There's something wrong with it and you should be better. And they removed my gallbladder and I got a million times worse. When you go in for a procedure and you expect to get better and you are worse to the point that you're taking $1,000 a month worth of drugs just to try to handle the pain that you were going through and such. Well, I had gone through several colonoscopies right after that, that the gallbladder removal, and in it they noticed that something was enlarged, and they said, if she doesn't improve, maybe we should do an ERCP. And they did this procedure 8 months later, and immediately after that surgery, I knew that I was better. But a funny thing happened with that surgery. The surgeon came to me right afterwards and said, I do thousands of these procedures. And he said, normally we go in and we remove stones and sludge. He said, but with you, it's like the whole area had grown shut. And we had to open it in order to let your digestive juices flow freely again. And, I just kind of said, okay, I'm just glad that I'm feeling better. And I went on with my life. And then I started experiencing, my daughter at that time was 4. And all of a sudden I started lactating. And, meanwhile, I had had years of loss of menses and aches and pains and headaches and, all these different symptoms and high blood pressure. But I was in thyroid issues, and
Mhm.
I went to doctors who treated each individual symptom. And about a year and a half after the gallbladder surgery, I had had a cyst in my breast tissue, and that cyst burst. I mean, it was a large cyst. Whenever I was looking in the mirror, literally, I could see the lump from the cyst. And I had set an appointment with an OBGYN, and he told me that if it were literally, it had burst the weekend prior to my appointment. My appointment was on a Monday. It had burst that weekend. And I could feel a rush of water go into my armpit. And I knew something had happened. The lump was gone. And I went to the OBGYN, and they said, if it's a normal cyst, it'll be gone in 10 to 14 days. We'll just keep an eye on it. And whatever it was, 2 months later, whenever I went to have it ultrasound, was still pumping out fluids into my breast tissue. And when that cyst burst, my symptoms went tenfold. Normally acromegaly is caused by a benign tumor that grows super slow. Well, we believe whatever this cyst was, whenever it burst, it was feeding my tumor. Whenever I was actually diagnosed with acromegaly because of my breast issues. The doctor had said, I realize that you're having all of these issues, but I think something really rare is causing it. And so he put me in touch with an internal medicine specialist. Even the internal medicine specialist couldn't figure it out. I had been breaking out under my chin. And someone told me, Jill, that is caused by hormonal fluctuations. You should see an endocrinologist. So I myself had set my first appointment with an endocrinologist. And when I had seen the internal medicine specialist, I kind of felt like I was double dipping on my insurance, because they're kind of similar doctors, except for one just, specifically specializes on hormones.
Yeah.
And so I went to the internal medicine specialist and said, hey, I have this endocrinologist appointment that I have for next week. I know that you guys just drew a bunch of my blood work. Do I still need to see her because you guys are doing the work? And later that day, the doctor called me back and he said, I don't care what you do, but do not miss that appointment. No matter what you do not miss that appointment with that endocrinologist. I had no idea what he had seen in my blood work until later, but he saw several off labs. And on my first appointment with the endocrinologist, she told me, I think that you have either acromegaly or Cushing's disease. And, at that time, I was just extremely grateful to have an answer.
Right.
Because at least this would give me some tools to fight what I was fighting. Because, obviously, trying to follow a regular diet and, I needed the extra support. And so, um, it took because I live in rural America. I went in the next day and they did the MRI and they did even more blood work. And the MRI showed that I had a 2.7 centimeter macroadenoma. And, they weren't sure exactly what I had. My endocrinologist had me contact a local neurosurgeon for surgery, which now I know how important it is that I didn't see that local neurosurgeon because choosing the correct surgeon can make all of the difference within acromegaly. I was very fortunate that that first neurosurgeon that I went to said, I could probably do this. He said, I've done one before, but you should probably see someone with more experience. And now I know from being the leader of in acromegaly community, we have a rule of thumb that the surgeon should have done at least 500 of these surgeries, not just one, before they
Yes.
touch you. They should do at least 50 per year in order to keep up their skill set. They should have a high remission rate and low complication rate. Those are
Keep going.
all really important questions to ask your neurosurgeon if you're considering surgery. Luckily, because this local neurosurgeon told me what he did, I decided to go to a center of excellence. I ended up going to MD Anderson in Houston, Texas. It's 11 hours from my home for the surgery. And I have to say, my surgeon met all of those qualifications, even though at the time I didn't know that rule of thumb.
Okay.
He came to me right after the surgery. We knew that because of the size of my tumor, I would probably have to be on medication for the rest of my life. And he saw something different in my case. Like I said, at that time he had done about 1,500 pituitary adenomas. And he came to my husband and I afterwards and he said, listen, normally these are very slow growing. He said, according to the MRI that I had had about a month prior, my tumor had grown a third in size in
Wow.
a month. And, in my capacity for being a leader within acromegaly, I know a handful of people who have had really exceptionally aggressive tumors. And most of them are dead now because it
Yes.
literally just spread all throughout the brain. So I'm incredibly grateful. And I truly do believe that everything happens for a reason. And maybe I'm here because I was meant to help other people with this condition. And, post surgery, my endocrinologist had actually, right after surgery, my local endocrinologist had quit. And I thought that even all endocrinologists were created equal. And I found out since that's not the case, also. I just looked in my insurance and found another endocrinologist. And the first endocrinologist had told me multiple times that due to the size of my tumor, I would probably have to be on medication for the rest of my life. And post surgery, I felt okay. The first month or so, I did have a CSF leak. They found that during surgery. They expected it. Um, but by month 2 post surgery, all of my symptoms had returned. And I
Wow.
went to this new endocrinologist and said, I am not well. And he told me I should go to Weight Watchers again. I told him that all of my symptoms were back, and literally I saw him on a monthly basis, and he really dismissed all of my. I wouldn't say that he exactly dismissed because in so my surgery was December 2005. In February 2005, we did the oral glucose tolerance test for acromegaly, which, if acromegaly is in question, it used to be the gold standard back then
Yes.
to determine if you still have acromegaly. Well, over the years, those levels have decreased in order to determine active disease. Years ago, it was anyone that got a 10 or below passed. Well, now it's point 0.4. Point
Wow.
0.4. And to make a long story short, I had gone to this doctor for 6 months, and I was getting worse and worse to the point that I couldn't even bend my fingers again, which was one of my other symptoms, even pre-diagnosis.
And this is all
And
after surgery,
at post surgery.
post surgery.
So in July of that year, I decided to reach out to a different endocrinologist. And it took 4 months for me to get in to see that. By that time, it was my third endocrinologist. And he said to me, "How does Dr. Such and such say that you're doing?" And I looked at him and I said, "He says that I'm fine, but I'm telling you right now, there's something very wrong. Every one of my symptoms are back. I am not fine." And he pulled my oral glucose tolerance test. Mind you, this was November, from February. And he said, "Well, according to this, you flunked. You should have been on medications to treat this disease this entire time." And so, you know, learning that not all endocrinologists are even created equal. These were all hard lessons that I learned myself. And that, being a leader within acromegaly, I try to help others miss these pitfalls that I fell into myself. Luckily, I've had the same endocrinologist now since 2006. And he listens, which I really, really want to tell patients out there. You have to find someone that will work with you collaboratively. He didn't tell me I just needed to go to Weight Watchers.
Yes.
Um, like, for instance, one of the symptoms of acromegaly is excessive swelling. And I went to him and said, "Listen, I was doing a clinical trial in Chicago, and in the middle of winter, I would take the subway, the raised, is it what I
The
can't remember
L,
what it
we call it the
the
L in
L,
Chicago.
yeah. downtown. And, even when it's freezing outside, I would walk the few blocks to the hospital. And by the time that I got there, the whole back of my head would just be drenched. And I went to
From
him and I
sweating.
told him this, and he said, I can help you. And I thought, okay, how are you going to help this? And he prescribed prescription in a bottle, antiperspirant that I could put on my scalp while it was still wet and blow dry naturally. To try, he is an endocrinologist that was willing to think outside of the box in order to help me. Um, so meanwhile, and I'm sorry, this is a long story. But
I think I've gotten the
so
Cliff
many,
Notes version of this story over the years. Now I'm getting the long
yeah,
version. So go right ahead.
yeah. Just like so many people with acromegaly is a
Yes,
progressive disease. And I
absolutely.
started out taking a somatostatin analog every 28 days. But I noticed that by day 21, I was not well. And so my doctor started prescribing it every 21 days instead of every 28. But even with that, I started to develop heart issues. And so I had to add um, a secondary, I had to do combo therapy with a daily pegvisomant in order to it works in a different way than the somatostatin analogs. It works on the cellular level rather than the tumor level. And so together, these two kind of give this disease the 1-2 punch because it's
Yes.
two medicines working in totally different ways to try to lower IGF-1 levels. Um, but then,
Okay, excuse me.
like I said, I have a really good relationship with my endocrinologist. And I mentioned to him these breast issues that I was still continuing to have. And I asked him to examine, and he did. And he put me in touch with a surgeon. And the surgeon decided to debulk the area. And Tony, whenever they did it, my levels cut in half.
Well, let me ask
We,
you this real quick, Jill. What were levels before your surgery, and
yeah, they were
what did they
around
get to
800.
afterwards?
They were
What?
around 800.
Okay.
And then post surgery, they were around 300, but then they creeped up some. And whenever, doing the somatostatin analog every 21 days and adding pegvisomant daily, 7 days a week, they were still just in the normal high range. But when they removed this area of my extremely dense tissue in my breast, literally my levels cut in half, which is like totally unheard of when you're living with a progressive disease. We have so many members out there, um, especially female, that have had breast issues that their doctors just totally dismiss. And so I am so lucky that my doctor, my endocrinologist, listened.
Thank for your endocrinologist, dear listen.
Yeah. And because my levels cut in half, I was able to just go to one therapy. To go from two therapies back down to one when you haven't had radiation. The team at MD Anderson had actually tried to refer me for radiation. And because they couldn't see any remaining tumor up in my head, they said, we're just going to do a broad path of radiation. And by this time, I was already online. I had already seen so many stories from patients that had had radiation. I went to my local endocrinologist and said, I told them no, but they've scheduled it anyway. I said, I think what's going on is happening within my breast tissue. And he said, Jill, this sounds strange, but I think you're right. And I said, well, what do I do? They scheduled insurance. I mean, they already got it approved through my insurance, and they've scheduled radiation with me. And he said, Jill, you just don't show up. And at that time, I had my breast surgery scheduled for the next week. And I went back down to them afterwards. And I said, I'm here. And I went through the expense of traveling down here just because I want to show you. You know, you didn't think this played a role, but it obviously did, or else my levels wouldn't have cut in half. And since that time, over the years, these areas in my breast tissue have grown back over and over
Wow.
again. And every time they grow back, my condition gets worse. And then they go in and they remove it, and then I get better. I personally think that it is a stimulating hormone called ghrelin.
You talk about the ghrelin quite often, in
I
fact.
do. Years ago, whenever I first started in my advocacy work, they said that diet did not play a role whatsoever. And one thing that I had noticed, you know, especially if I ate anything carby or sugary, within 30 minutes, I would get a headache. And I lived my life doing Atkins, trying to stay under 20 carbs a day for years, on top of everything else to try to control this disease. And, you know, ghrelin is a stimulating hormone, which in my opinion explains why it was so aggressive, because so many signals were being sent up telling it to be aggressive.
You mentioned
It
the
also
carbs and the
affects,
sugars. I'm sorry. You mentioned the carbs and the sugars.
yeah.
So have you cut that out of your diet currently?
So, I used to, but years ago, even though I did not qualify, I self-paid to do the gastric sleeve procedure. The gastric sleeve procedure lowers the ghrelin hormone by 85 to 90% instantly.
Now, let me ask
Ghrelin
you
is
this.
typically, hmm
Let me ask you this. Picked gastric sleeve over gastric bypass.
absolutely.
Okay, can you explain why?
Because so typically the ghrelin hormone is made in the fundus of the stomach. And when they do a sleeve, they actually remove a large portion of the stomach, which is what typically makes that ghrelin hormone go down drastically. In people without acromegaly, whenever they have the gastric sleeve, literally their ghrelin hormone is super, super low. Well, because of my relationship with so many leaders within acromegaly, post sleeve surgery, I was actually able to have my ghrelin levels measured. And l- literally, because my levels were so high, it just put me in the normal range.
And it's pretty
Um,
hard. It's pretty hard, Jill, to get your ghrelin levels
it
measured. Is
is.
that correct?
It is.
But
There
since
was,
you are
at
the
one
GOAT of
time, there was,
acromegaly, you were able to get that done.
correct, correct.
Okay.
I had one of the leaders within acromegaly literally walk the lab through the testing.
Sounds good.
And, you know, I'm so thankful for all of the support that I've gotten, you know, from the endocrine world regarding this disease. You know, one thing that people don't understand is doctors are going to be doctors. They don't have to help you, you know, in a personal capacity, or, you know, we have physicians that speak at our medical meetings to help educate patients. You know, they don't have to go the extra, you know, mile for us. But I have to tell you, I have worked with so many within acromegaly, that do choose to try to go that extra mile for their patients. I've been told that acromegaly patients, maybe it's because of the road that we travel, we're a special type of patient. And we have more compassion for others. And, I truly do believe that most of us just want to do better for others in the future with this disease.
That's
Um,
exactly how I feel.
yeah.
And you said a mouthful with all that, and that made me think about, you mentioned your surgery. With my surgery, and I want to talk about, I don't know if this is a symptom or is it just something that just happens that goes along with having pituitary surgery. The main thing that I deal with, and I want to and I want to bring this up because other people deal with it as well, is brain fog, or what we call acrofog, or short-term memory loss. That's the thing that I deal with on a daily basis. It's extremely difficult for me to attain new knowledge. It's kind of, there's oftentimes that in mid conversation, I'll forget what I'm saying. In fact, I got a story for you. I woke up this morning with the idea that I knew I had something to do. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I knew that I had something to do this morning. I have to keep my phone with me at all times. I pulled out my phone and was like, oh, I've got an appointment with Jill today.
Yeah.
So at the top of my head, I just couldn't remember it. And there's so many of us that you talked about having your gallbladder removed. If anyone has had their gallbladder removed, make a comment in the note it in the comments for me. And if you struggle with brain fog, also note that in the comments for me. We can talk about that later. Also, at work, for example, I typically kind of try to stay on the same pattern or path every day just so I can get through the day. At home,
Hmm.
I try to make sure, I always say there's a place for everything and everything has its place. I've got to put everything in the same place all the time. Otherwise, I'll have no idea where it is. And I struggle with that constantly. And I had no, we've talked, you and I, on and off. And again, I mentioned that you were given, you gave the long version, or you've been given the long version. I've more or less caught the short version of your story from time to time. But you've had a rough road, and for you to do all that you do on top of it is a testament of your strength and your character, Jill.
Hmm.
I didn't know it was as in depth for you as it is.
Well, I have to say that I think that because I had focused on the ghrelin hormone, I think that I sent you a picture, but I also think that I need to send you my before picture because typically people don't see the correction that they've seen in me. And I think it's because I don't only focus on growth hormone or IGF-1, but I also focus on the ghrelin hormone. Um, for instance, um, whenever I was in high school, I wore a 7.5 shoe. When I was diagnosed, I wore a 10.5 or an 11. When I had my pituitary surgery, I wore um, post pituitary surgery, uh, a 9, or, around a 9. And I thought that that was the best that it was going to get. When I started focusing on the ghrelin hormone, I wear a 7.5 shoe again. Ghrelin has been tied to inflammation, sleep disorders, brain fog, so many of these things, excessive hunger. One of the things that I noticed is that I would eat, and 30 minutes later, I would be hungry again. It just made no sense to me. Um, and, I think that for an acromegaly patient to do really well, you need to focus on every single hormone within the growth hormone spectrum and make sure that they're all within the normal range, not just one. Um, you know, I'm I never even thought that I would make it to today, to be honest with you, much less doing as well as what I'm doing today. Just recently I've worked on 3 medical manuscripts um for acromegaly, and I was working on one of them yesterday doing some of the final adjustments to it. And it was what we want to see in the future. And one of the things that I said in this was, that acromegaly, in my opinion, isn't just about the numbers. It's about symptoms. And in the future, I would like it to, whenever you're thinking about treatment, I want it to be for people to actually look at restorative. I want people to do better than what they were the years that they were suffering through this disease with these, with these newer treatments that are coming out. Um, one of the things that we've done mental health studies, we've done all these different studies within our community. One of the things that we've found, especially in the work that I've done with the FDA, the Patient Focused Drug Development Program, is that our levels typically do not match our symptoms.
Yes.
And, in my opinion, more needs to be done to help us get back our quality of life. We have too many patients out there suffering, and more needs to be done. But I can tell you, I am now 54. I've been living with this disease for at least 30 years. But I never thought that I would feel as well as what I feel today. So there is
And
hope.
that's
I'm
based on
still
the
on
fact that,
medication,
repeat that, I'm sorry.
but I'm still on medication. I will be on medication for the rest of my life, I'm sure. But at least I manage the disease rather than the disease controlling me.
That's true. I say all the time, acromegaly is going to do what acromegaly does, but we have to do what's medically needed in order to put us in a position to whereas we have a better quality of life, at least the best quality of life that we can get. Let
Yeah.
me ask
I
you this,
tell
as the
patients that you are worth the work it takes to help improve your life. And I think so many patients lose that, and they um, kind of give up. And it breaks my heart
right.
because we are worth the work it takes to help improve our lives.
Yeah, quite often in our acromegaly Facebook group, I come across so many people who are at the point where they don't even want to go to the doctor anymore,
Yeah.
or at least were at a point when they once was like, I'm doing all this for nothing before they finally have gotten diagnosed. And it's a rough stretch. My story, I was lucky. Everyone wasn't as lucky or hasn't been, I think, as lucky as me. I didn't go through a lot of the struggles that a lot of people did or have, but we all travel different roads, and everything is different for everyone. As your work uh, as the president, I mean, and the work that you do from the advocacy side, what kind of goes on behind the scenes? Like, what are you doing? And I know you've got an event coming up that you're working on, and what goes on? What are you doing that everyone doesn't see? I know it's a lot, but let's go into detail and let everyone else know what you're doing.
Well, there's a lot that I'm I feel very fortunate to be able to do. Just today, I've had a couple meetings with pharmaceutical companies. Um, Many of them, we have monthly meetings. Um, there are new drugs in development that look over protocols and say, how could you even ask a patient to go through this? This needs to change. I there's so many different things regarding um, more than just the day-to-day managing the online support group. When I try to make sure that patients are paid for medical surveys that they do, and that it's a one-time use of information in order to help improve the science. Um,
Keep up
oh,
the good work with that. I've gotten paid for mine. Thank you.
um, you know, uh, I think one of the most important things that we do, though, are our educational conferences. Because I know I'm someone that truly believes if you give someone a fish, you feed them for a day. But if you teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. And
Absolutely.
w- and in our educational programs, we kind of uh, treat patients like doctors are treated. I've sat in many of these CME courses. I've helped teach CME courses regarding acromegaly. And, our patient population, at least the ones that attend these meetings and stuff, are typically considered highly educated regarding acromegaly. I believe that patients deserve to know about each one of the therapies, how they work, what makes them different. I truly do believe that patients should be able to collaboratively decide their treatment plans with their physicians, and that it is part of the patient um, advocating for themselves. That typically a patient that will advocate for themselves typically has a better quality of life.
That's
And
true. And I found it it's difficult for me listening to some people who have a hard time doing that for themselves, actually talking to the doctors. I've actually had people who've asked me to speak with their doctors for them. I just don't take no for an answer from my doctor. I mean, well, my
yeah,
endocrinologist.
yeah,
Yeah, Dr. Wong, endocrinologist to the stars, is he and I work hand in hand with the care, and he's one of the best at it. But
agreed.
yeah, it's difficult for me. It's saddening, some people, and I hope people get better at advocating for themselves and putting themselves in a better position to whereas their doctors are working harder for them and really, really putting the best effort to getting them the care that they need. Let's talk about, you mentioned the conferences. You've got a Patient Acromegaly Day coming up online on March 13th that I will be attending. What exactly is going on there? I've looked at the schedule. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, this is going to be a virtual conference that we're hosting with NYU Langone out of New York City. They have a bunch of local speakers and also myself. I'll be facilitating a session, and you know, um, I'm contacted all the time. Usually, we like to have these in person because, especially when you're dealing with something rare, you never understand the value of being in a room where every single person understands what you're going through.
I prefer to be in person.
Yes.
I
And
enjoy
we
seeing
wanted it to
everyone.
be in person. They just couldn't obtain a venue at that time. I can tell you, um, oh, I believe it's May 16th. Stanford in California is having an in person. And then, every other year we have a large international meeting. And this year it will be October 16th through the 18th. We will have multiple tracks going on. We try to bring in every specialist that we can think of that have, dermatology, dentistry, ophthalmology, um, you know, every single aspect of what we need in order to live our best lives. And
I
we're
can't wait
hosting that.
for it. I'll be there with bells on.
Yeah. I mean, our
Back up a
last
little bit,
one,
Jill. You mentioned, repeat that?
that we hosted with Barrows, they did live pituitary surgery. And patients were able, the surgeon came out and explained what was going to happen, went back into surgery, and patients were able to ask him questions while he was doing the surgery.
I watched that online at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
That was
I mean,
amazing. He was there in person, in the
yes.
room with all you guys,
Yes. But then
left,
he went back to the operating room. Yeah.
went to surgery.
Yeah.
That was amazing. That was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Back up a little
I
bit and talk
can't.
about what's going on in May. What exactly was
In
that at
May, the
Stanford? Is
Stanford
that something that
meeting,
we all can attend?
we all can attend that. It's May 16th at Stanford. I do believe that they will live stream it. But if not, it is an in-person event also. Um, so one of the uh, top surgeons in the country, Juan Carlos Fernandez Miranda, runs the program at Stanford. He developed a new technique that actually sees a higher remission rate than what most surgeons can obtain, because he removes the medial wall that they have found. Tumor typically invades, even if you can't see it with the naked eye. So we've had over the years um, quite a few patients that have gone to him for second or even third surgeries and have obtained remission. So, but
I have
they,
yet to meet him. I'm looking forward, hopefully, at one point to have a conversation with him. Hopefully, he'll come back out to one of the conferences.
well,
And
I would be happy to do that introduction. He
thank you.
is
Thank you.
a wonderful human being. Um,
You talk about him
I
quite often. You and I have had a
do.
conversation, and
Uh-huh.
I'm looking forward to finally get an opportunity to meet him and hopefully have a conversation with him here on the podcast.
Yeah. I'm sure that he
We'll
would
see.
do it.
I think he will. I think that'll be a good idea.
Hmm.
So moving forward, you mentioned about some clinical trials that are currently going on. Is that anything that you can elaborate on a little bit more? Are we still looking
I
for patients to be
I would
involved
be
in
thrilled,
those?
because we really need patients to step up. Um, currently there are two that are currently recruiting, and I believe that there'll be a third that's coming up. At the last endo, the third one was the therapy was discussed. I can tell you about the different types of therapies. And I know,
Let's do it.
for instance, that your doctor is one of the clinical trial docs. Um, for some of these studies. One of the studies is a 3-month version of our somatostatin analog. So instead of getting the monthly shots, it's one shot every 3 months. The second one, they're looking just for patients who are hard to control, who aren't, you know, um, easily their numbers on a somatostatin analog, they're still not brought into the normal range. It typically takes, combo therapy or triple therapy. And in this second therapy, they're just looking for those. They'll leave you on the somatostatin analog and add this other therapy. One of the positive things about that is you can stay on the somatostatin analog throughout the entire thing. And the third one, the one that they recently did at Endo and talked about wanting to start clinical trials on, is a long-acting a growth hormone antagonist, which currently is a daily shot, but this is a once a
Okay.
month pegvisomant, basically. And you know, I'm so excited about new therapies on the horizon. But we need patients to fill these trials. There's 3 of them. And um I like in one of them they need like close to 150 patients.
Well,
And
let
when
me
we
ask you
live
this,
in a
Jill.
rare space,
Let me ask you
these
this. Are
people
these US based or are these outside the US?
so the first 2 that I was telling you about are worldwide.
Okay.
Yeah, worldwide trials. And if anyone on this podcast would like to know more information, I'm happy to send them, to some sites where they can get more information. I
That's exactly
myself,
why I was asking. And
hmm
what do you consider, or is there considered, an ideal patient outside of the people whose IGF-1 is hard to control? Would you consider someone who has been having a hard time with their insurance covering their current medication or anything of that
yes.
nature?
So, absolutely. One of the reasons that we talk a lot about clinical trials, especially at the beginning of the year, is because of some of the insurance companies like to play games, and I'm not saying
Yes,
that lightly, regarding our therapies and in covering our therapies. And I myself have participated in 4 clinical trials. And, at the time, I did it strictly just to try to help in the science and to try to, make sure that other people had access to newer drugs and such. But the entire time I was in clinical trials, I really didn't have to mess with my insurance. And, I got the care that I needed. Your
let me ask you
doctor
this. Let
was
me
one
ask you
of my
this
doc.
about clinical. Let me ask you this about clinical trials.
Mhm.
For someone whose IGF-1 is in range, is it suitable or plausible for them to get involved in a clinical trial, or should they just leave well enough alone?
So let me ask you this. Are you controlled with the medication that you're on? Or are you talking about someone whose IGF-1 is within normal ranges just post-surgery? Because in every clinical trial, when you're a patient, you have to prove or there has to be evidence that you still have active disease. Let me tell you what typically isn't allowed in a clinical trial. Um, if you've had radiation in the last several years, that typically disqualifies you because they don't know if it's the medication or if it's the radiation kicking in. Um, but I can tell you, I mean, I personally did clinical trials myself more just to try to help others. Um, you know, um,
So you were
the
in a
first,
space, you were in a space where you really didn't need to do it, but you just wanted to help.
correct,
And that's
correct,
what I wanted to know.
correct. And they need to know that, for instance, I traveled once a month to Chicago for years. That's why I would hop on the L and head down to Northwestern. Um, the first trial that I ever did, it was because I was kind of tired of the monthly shots. And the first trial that I ever did was for a 6-month implant. 6 months. I only had to think about the medication twice a year. And I was I did that for 2 years, and that therapy wasn't approved because the FDA, from what I understand, came back and said, "Okay, you've proven that the therapy works in this, but now we want you to do a whole entire new study proving that the implant material itself doesn't cause cancer." And the company said, "We can't keep doing this." But I know most of the participants in that trial, and most of them felt like I did. And after that medication didn't get approved, I kind of went through a depression because I thought, my gosh, I will be chained to my monthly shots for the rest of my life. Um, and that's why whenever there was an oral version, um, I really started advocating because one of the things that I learned, whenever I was doing the monthly shots, I was having breakthrough symptoms before the next injection. And whenever I did the implant that lasted 6 months, I didn't have those breakthroughs. So what that told me was if you get a consistent amount of medicine each day, you don't have those breakthrough symptoms. So that's when I started advocating for an oral version of our medications that patients could take. At that time, we had the 3 times a day octreotide shot, which isn't easy to maintain.
I started
For
out
for
on
most,
that shot. I think I mentioned
yeah,
that to you. I was very unsuccessful in sustaining that.
yeah, it's very unsustainable. And and now we have 2 oral therapies. And I'm just extremely hopeful, that every single medication that is put out there, one of the things that the FDA does is it has to show efficacy and it has to show some improvement from what's already out there. And so, I'm extremely hopeful for the future of acromegaly patients. And
Let me ask you this. Do you know currently how many drugs for acromegaly are on the market?
yes, well, and it depends on how you look at it. So in 2014, cabergoline was actually added, but it's not even on label to treat acromegaly. But they found Dr. Mark Mulich from Northwestern. He was a prolactinoma. He focused a lot on that, but they found that it works in a small percentage of acromegaly patients. But there's sandostatin, sandostatin LAR, lanreotide, which uses nanotechnology. But it's still octreotide is the same active ingredient in all those medications. It's a somatostatin analog. And then we have Mycapssa, which is the oral version of octreotide, and now we have paltusotine. We have Signifor, that hits a couple extra receptors. It's typically for those hard to control patients. It typically works really well because of the 2 extra receptors that it hits. And then we have pegvisomant that goes to each individual cell in the body. And what it does is it convinces it that it's already gotten growth hormone. And so it makes growth hormone ineffective. So you can have high levels of growth hormone on pegvisomant, but it doesn't matter A lot of patients that are on pegvisomant, their doctor doesn't even measure their growth hormone. They just, you know, keep track of their IGF-1 levels. And people also need to realize why they test IGF-1. So when you think about diabetes and how they test for an A1C,
Yes.
A1C is kind of a look at your insulin levels for the last 3 months. Well, um, IGF-1 uh, reacts regarding growth hormone. It is kind of like a 3-month look of your growth hormone levels. And that's why they have found that, it is a suitable thing to look at. I Over the years, I've been so fortunate that the Pituitary Society and the Endocrine Society and even the European Society of Endocrinology, they've all embraced me, and so I attend their meetings. And one of the things um, that I'm just extremely fortunate to be able to learn just like the physicians have learned, and to be able to help educate other other people living with acromegaly the same way that I, have been. And to be able to think outside of the box. Not just clinical trials, but for instance, the other day, there was a doctor that I've worked with for years that contacted me and said, "Hey, I was working with someone from Japan, and we're interested in studying aneurysms in acromegaly." Well, I know quite a few people within our community that has had issues with aneurysms.
Yes.
And, I think that we are in such an interesting time, you know, in this world because of the internet that, 100 years ago, someone with acromegaly would never know anyone else. And now, we can reach across the globe and put all of us together and get these studies done and done
It's
effectively.
been amazing for me while advocating the amount of people that have reached out to me from all over the world. I
Mhm.
had no idea that my reach would go across the country, across the world. It's been an amazing experience for me. I
Well,
look forward to meeting more people.
Tony, um, you touched me the first time that I met you and I heard your story. Um, and I felt like you could make a difference within this disease. Um,
Thank
I
you.
have had people from all different races come to me, um, and say, "Is this a white person only?"
I felt that
And
way.
I'm like, "It isn't discriminatory."
Yes.
I just think that there are, people uh, they don't get the health care that they need and deserve. And that's heartbreaking to me. For instance, in the US, they say that it is diagnosed at a rate of 3 per million per year. But in Russia, they say it's only diagnosed at 1 per million per year. And they
Wow.
say that there are just as many people walking around with it there, but they don't go to the doctor. And I think that we live in a society where we're taught not to show weakness or to um, and I think that there are at least twice as many than they say in the US there's around 20,000 patients, but I would say there's at least 40,000 people walking around with this disease. And that's
Right.
heartbreaking to me. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first got diagnosed, and started researching, I didn't see anyone of color
Yeah.
online. So the idea that you say, is this a white person's only disease is the idea that I had early on. And in fact, I've been kind of hands on for quite a while now. And I've only met one other African American in person who has acromegaly. In person. I've talked to a few online and on the phone, but I've only met one face to face.
Yeah.
So, with it being a rare disease, it's even rarer amongst people of color
Yeah.
and African American. Men in particular, we just don't go to the hospital a lot.
Yeah.
And I was one of them. Luckily, I got convinced by a few friends to go and get a primary care doctor, which kind of got the ball rolling for me and pointed me in the right direction. But I'm
Well, you
thankful that I
need to
did.
know that that especially in clinical trials, they needed a diverse, sampling of people. Um, and one of the first African American patients that I had ever met was in a clinical trial in Chicago, by the way. And she's, you know, an absolutely lovely individual. But she was at one of our conferences, and she was actually the first person to come up to me and say, "Is this a white person only?" And I totally, understood why she was saying that. But the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, I know people of all different races with this. And it happens in animals also, dogs, cats,
Cats.
all different kinds of animals also. You know, um and I don't know if you know this, but something that I learned through the years, they say one of the first giants that was ever written about in history was actually Goliath from the Bible. And the
Huh.
reason he didn't see the stone coming at him was because of our peripheral vision issues.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
That's a story I didn't know.
yeah. Yeah.
I had yet to hear that one.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of
So,
stories I haven't heard. And there's a lot of good stories about some great people that I've met through our communities
yeah.
that have moved me and helped on not only me and my journey, but those people sharing their stories have helped others as well. And I'm so thankful that I've met all of you all and that I've come in contact with and built the relationships that I'm building and will continue to build. You are phenomenal and all that you've done and continue to do for the acromegaly community. There's so many of us that are so thankful for you. And I'll always continue to say that, like so many others. Thank you for
Well,
all that you do.
feel the same about you. I can't tell you the difference that you're making stepping up and being a leader because there's a lot of people due to kind of the stigma of this disease don't wish to step up. And I get that. That's their, and no shame or there, but I really applaud those because if we don't start stepping up and bringing light to this, our diagnosing rates will stay stagnant. And the whole thing is to try to get patients diagnosed sooner so that they can get back their quality of life, so
Right.
that they can catch these tumors small. The difference between remission in someone with a microadenoma versus a macroadenoma, the rates are staggering.
Okay.
The difference in remission rates. I mean, if they can catch it under 10 millimeters, the chances if you go to a good qualified surgeon for remission are actually really, really high. And, the whole thing is we want patients to be able to live their best lives. We deserve to live our best lives.
Yeah, we
And
do.
so,
We do.
yeah,
And
I
that's the
can't come in.
reason that I finally began to talk about it. I say quite often that I didn't want to talk about it. There's so many of
Hmm.
us who are ashamed of it.
Hmm.
I kind of got over that, and I'm trying to help other people get over it as well. I think for me, something changed honestly when I turned 50. I kind of that switch kind of cut on that I just didn't care anymore
Yeah.
about what other people think.
think I think that there are people who follow and there are people who lead. And I think that you're a leader. And especially in an area where we need leaders.
Yes.
We need people willing to step up and um do what it takes to help others. Um people ask me, how do you do everything that you do?
Yes.
And I am just like anybody else. Um, but I saw a need and I wasn't going to let this go without trying to help.
Let me ask you
And I
this.
think that
You said,
everyone has that.
let me say this. You said you saw me,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna take that literally. Did you ever get to the point when you looked in the mirror and you didn't want to take pictures anymore? Let's talk about that because there's so many
Yeah.
people. I was one of them. There's so many people in our community that get to that point. Can you elaborate on that a
Yeah.
little bit?
I wouldn't allow pictures. In fact, my diagnosing photo that's out there in the public um was only taken because my husband forced me to take that picture. He gave me a guilt trip and said, "Jill, if you were to die tomorrow, we wouldn't have any photos of you." And, now I'm thankful that I have that picture because I show people on our Faces of Hope on acromegalycommunity.org that you can start here, but with work, you can end up over here. And,
Yes.
I show people, my before picture, and they say, "That's not you." And I say, "Yes, it is." This is the face of acromegaly, which I'm happy to provide you with that picture also that you can put on the end of this video. And my picture whenever I was going in for my breast surgery, you can see how bad I had gotten again. And then I did a picture 4 days later without any medication in between. And my face looks completely different.
Yeah, I
um,
totally went through the
yeah.
no picture, no video phase, and mine was as recent as about 9 months ago. People
Wow.
people seem to think that I've been on camera for quite some time when I started doing videos and I did the acromegaly reality campaign. It was very hard to find a picture of me
Yeah. Yeah.
online anywhere. I
And you're
hadn't
a
out
handsome man.
Oh, stop it.
But I mean, think of one of the things that caused me to become an advocate, and I've talked about this in the past, was whenever I came home from surgery at MD Anderson, I had some questions because I had somewhat of a medical event, and I had called the ER and I didn't really get any real answers. And so I went onto what I thought was a protected space. And the first thing that I read was where someone had written, "Big hands, big feet." Sounds like a bunch of big fuglies to me. And I had just gotten home from surgery and I cried for 2 days because this disease, I just felt like I was getting uglier and uglier, and I didn't need someone that I didn't even know telling me that I was ugly. And when that happened, I went onto that site 2 days later, and the comment was still there. I didn't even ask my question because it had upset me so much. And I went on 2 days later to try to ask my question, and the comment was still there, so I messaged the admin, and I said, "Hey, could you please, remove this? This is damaging." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes the crazies get by me." And I thought to myself, if I'm ever in a position, um, that I run a support group, I'm gonna make sure that never happens. And that's why we are so for acromegaly support in on Facebook for our groups, why we ask questions, why we are so diligent in managing that group, because I don't ever want one of our patients to be treated like that. We deserve better.
Let me ask you this, Jill. I know the story behind how you became president of the acromegaly community, but can you elaborate on that for those who don't know?
Well, years ago, I started up a women's only support group because I knew very quickly I didn't want to talk about loss of menses or facial hair or all of the different issues that females went through. And Wayne Brown was the person who originally started the community, and he had come to me multiple times asking me to take it over. And it wasn't until um, the community was having some issues, and I thought to myself, I can't let all of the good that has come from this community just die. Um, and so the third time he had asked me, I finally said yes. um, I don't regret it at all. Um, I have made this my life's work, and I'm thankful to be in a position to try to help others. Um, I truly think that it gives me a reason that this has happened to me. Um, and sometimes you have to have a really thick skin, which in acromegaly you typically do.
Literally.
um, yeah, but I do my best. I always try to put the community in front of myself. And
And
I'm
you've
just
done that.
n-
You've done
I
that.
thank you. Thank you. Um, and I want every single patient to know that they're worth that work. So we can't do it for you, but we
Yes.
can we can walk beside you and hold your hand and help you while you're going through it.
And while
And
you're
hopefully they
putting
can get back to live their best life.
let me say this, while you're putting the community before yourself, I've got to give a shout out to Shane Cisco for allowing you to do that for us. I've yet to meet Shane, but I personally want to take the opportunity to thank him for his sacrifice for allowing you to be the GOAT of the acromegaly
Thank
community.
you. I'm sure that it has not been easy for him over the years. But uh, literally, I married a saint, and he sees the good that this community does, and he never gripes at me. We'll be in the middle of dinner and someone will call, or, something needs to be done. There's times, especially, whenever I was working on these three manuscripts, where I would be
Yes.
in my office from, 6 a.m. until 10 at night. And, um, and doing the conferences. One thing that I want to add about these conferences is we have a scholarship program. So if you are a patient that because of financial need, you don't think that you'll be able to attend, please contact us. because we will provide a scholarship, as long as those funds are there. The whole reason that these meetings are every other year is because I take all of the money that I make throughout, um, you know, doing all the different projects and such, and put them in a fund for scholarships. And our last international conference, there was $40,000 that we used towards buying down the hotel rates. Our room rate was $109 a night. And if you couldn't afford that, would we literally purchase your hotel room? We do ask if you're a scholarship patient, if you would be willing to share a room with another scholarship patient, just to try to help our dollars go as far as possible. And we'll buy the airline ticket. And this isn't just people in the US. We want to bring in advocates from around the world.
Yes.
We have patients, that we have leaders from the Philippines, from India, from Australia, from the UK, from France, from Ireland, literally from all over, that have
Canada.
attended our meetings.
Yes.
And it's all about getting the proper education to people.
Jill, it's been a pleasure, as always. The GOAT of the acromegaly community. Much success to you moving forward.
Thank you so much. I have to tell you, just very quickly,
Go
I
ahead.
didn't know what goat was. And one time you didn't know, I thought, what is this? And I Googled it. Because you
You are
called me
the
the goat.
greatest of all time when it comes to acromegaly, and you will
Ah,
continue to be.
thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And I'm going to close with this. Just want to say thank you again, Jill, not just for being here today, but for everything you do in the entire acromegaly space. What you and the acromegaly community have built is more than an organization. It's a lifeline for so many of us. It's the first place we finally feel seen, understood, and not alone. It's just so much that you do. I know your leadership, your heart, and your tireless work to make sure those of us living with acromegaly have a voice and aren't taken for granted. I'm extremely thankful to be able to call you a friend. And to everyone listening right now, if you're living with acromegaly, you're caring for someone who has it, or you're still searching for answers, please, please know this. There's a safe space for you. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to connect with the acromegaly community, join the acromegaly community support Facebook group, and get involved. Don't be afraid to speak up and advocate for yourself. Thanks for hanging with me today. If you found interest in this episode, drop a comment, like it, share it, and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow me on all my social media platforms. Until the next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and never stop believing that better days are possible.